Good morning, everyone. Let me say once again, welcome to Victory. I know you've been welcomed a lot, but I haven't gotten a turn yet, so welcome to Victory. My name's Evan. I'm not on staff here, and we've been growing a lot lately, so I know a lot of you might not know who I am. So I feel like maybe it'd be helpful to build some rapport and some trust if I open my message today with a self-deprecating story from my childhood. Would that be all right? All right, let me warn you ahead of time. This story gets a little intense in parts, so be ready to cover your children's ears. All right. So for most of my grade school career, I was a car rider, but there was a period in time where I was a bus rider. And I loved that period because I got home before my parents, and I had the house to myself for a little bit. Now, I've been a rule follower, I will admit, so I wasn't doing anything crazy, but I loved that little window where I got to watch SpongeBob and eat snacks. Like, that was the highlight of my day. I remember one point, though, it was a hot day near the end of the school year, and my mom arrived home from work, and there was a rank smell in our house. It was awful. We thought it had to be a dead mouse, so we cleaned everywhere. We put out traps all over the place, but we never ended up finding the little dude. The smell, though, it kept getting worse. So we started inspecting all the toilets. My parents called the city to figure out if there was like a sewage main break. I remember we dumped everything in our food, or in our fridge and our pantry, just in case it was some overlooked expired food. But still, we couldn't find anything. And the smell, as the heat of the summer set in, I'm telling you, it was nauseating. It was overwhelming. I actually found out years later, because my parents sheltered me from this little paranoia, I found out that they actually considered calling in a wellness check on our downstairs apartment neighbors in case they had died in the apartment. Or, in case they were psychotic killers who'd murdered somebody and left the body in the apartment. Seriously, there's some alternate universe out there where you millennials in the crowd are hearing this exact story on a true crime podcast. It was intense, guys. Until one fateful day, we were doing some summer house cleaning, and my dad, who was quite tall, he found something on top of one of the cabinets. And he pulled this thing down and set it on the counter, and all of us were just amazed at what we saw. It was a bowl full of old, dried, crusted over, rotting Skyline chili. Now, for some reason, you have no idea. For some reason, my parents both looked at me with these accusatory faces. Why do they assume I did it? I'm an only child, but literally anyone could have done that. But as I stared at the bowl for a minute, suddenly, as the smells wafted over me, my memories came back. My response was, "You found it. That's the bowl of chili I lost." To which my mom, of course, responded, "What? How do you lose a bowl of chili on top of the cabinets?" My dad was speechless as I explained. I told him I remembered a day where I came home and I was feeling good and hungry, if you know what I mean. And my usual yogurt or banana just wasn't going to hit the spot. So I cracked a can of Skyline chili, God's brown goodness. And I poured it in a bowl. And because covering your bowls in the microwave is for dorks, I didn't do that. And it exploded all over the microwave. So I pulled it out, and being the thoughtful young lad that I was, I thought, I don't want to get the countertops all dirty while I clean the microwave. I'm just going to set my bowl up here on top of the cabinets. And I forgot that it was there. At this point, my dad finally found his words, and he said, "But what did you eat?" The most dad question of all time. What did you eat? I still don't know the answer. I have no idea. I tell this absurd story to ask a simple question. Have you ever lost something? Surely you have. It's part of the human experience, right? We've all lost things. And losing something, it is an intense feeling. There's nothing to get your heart racing quite as quickly as when you reach down in public and can't feel your phone. Or when you're rushing for the door late for work only to discover that your keys aren't where you thought you left them. Losing anything, whether it's big or small, it's uncomfortable, and it triggers this terrible anxious feeling inside of us. If the object is something that's cheap or easily replaced, then you'll get over it pretty quickly. But what if it isn't? What if it's something that matters to you? Something expensive enough that you would feel the sting of replacing it, or maybe you can't afford to replace it. What if it's an heirloom and you could never truly replace it sentimentally, even if you replaced it physically? Or what if it's something that's genuinely rare or one of a kind and there is no replacement? Losing things, it's uncomfortable, but losing valuable things, it is agonizing. It is so uncomfortable. When you lose those types of things, it's a whole different ballgame. You're flipping couch cushions. You're dumping drawers. You text all the parents who were at baseball practice last night. You deep clean your car. You call the department store and ask about their lost and found policy. You might even get desperate enough that you brave the untamed wilderness that is the Facebook City of Franklin chat and make a post offering a reward for the return of your item. And only after all of that do you pause long enough to make a second post complaining about the fast food worker who forgot your extra pickles, because when in Rome, right? But you never stop seeking. You never stop searching that important thing that was lost. It tends to just haunt you everywhere you go. You think, man, where is that stinking thing? You know, Jesus was a big fan of using stories to communicate important messages to people. Josh talked about this last week. Jesus told stories that we call parables. And parables are essentially they're earthly stories with heavenly meanings. They are fictional stories that are used to teach nonfiction principles. And Jesus used these stories because he knew that storytelling is the most effective way to communicate important things. We can understand stories easily. We can remember them easier than random facts or anecdotes. And as humans, we tend to picture ourselves in stories without really even being asked to. We engage with them in a different way. One of Jesus' most famous stories that he told was actually about losing something. We talked about it last week. It was the story of the lost sheep. But because this was an extra important thing, he told another similar story right after it, which we can read in Luke chapter 15, starting with verse 8. Here's that story. Suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and she loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls all her friends and her neighbors together and she says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin." A lot of people back then in Jesus' time considered him an entertainer, and they would travel for miles around, even if they didn't believe that he was who he says he was. They just liked listening to him talk. But Jesus, he wasn't really concerned with entertainment. Jesus was concerned with important, eternal truths that he wanted to communicate with people. That was always his goal. And in this case, that's probably a good thing, because this story, it stinks. I mean, look at it again. Here's the story Jesus told. Woman has coin. Woman loses coin. Woman looks under couch. Woman finds coin. Woman calls all her friends and says, "Yay, my coin." Really, Jesus? Not exactly Oscar bait, is it? I mean, it's like marginally better than the plot of the new Star Wars movies. So what is, thank you. So what is Jesus trying to communicate with this kind of lame story? Well, Jesus knew people would be wondering that, so he continued. This was verse 8 and 9. Here's what he says in verse 10. He says, "In the same way as this story, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents." That's his point. And we get it, right? There's the moral of the story. God wants to reach lost people. But, I mean, why didn't he just say that? Wouldn't that have been easier and faster and more digestible? Sure. But it also would have been a lot less relatable, right? I mean, you and I, we've never been to heaven. You and I, we've never met an angel, but we've all lost something, right? We know what that feels like. We know that agony, that desperation when something important has disappeared. Jesus didn't want us to just hear this story of the woman's coin. He wanted us to feel it. He wanted us to know that redemption is important to God. The idea of someone accepting the good news of salvation was worthy of celebration in heaven. And the idea of someone not accepting the good news, that is akin to the panic we feel when we lose something that's precious to us. God doesn't merely want to rescue lost people. God is desperate to rescue lost people. God God doesn't just want it, he's desperate for us, and he wants us to feel that weight because he's given us a mission. We have a part to play in that desperate tale. If you don't know this, we Christians, we do have a very specific, spelled out mission. We got a mission from God, like the Blues Brothers. Here's what it is. It says, and this is what we refer to as the Great Commission. Jesus says to them, meaning his disciples, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age. This is our great commission, our big mission from God. This is the metric by which the success of the church can be measured and will be measured one day. And Jesus didn't just want us to hear that. It's not some slogan you put on a t-shirt. Jesus told this story because he wants us to feel that mission, the desperation that he feels. The desperation like a poor woman who loses a coin that represents 1/10 of her entire life's savings. That's what Jesus wants us to feel. Now I'm going to ask you another question, and this one, honestly, this is a bit more challenging, so please don't feel pressured to nod or say yes or anything like that. But I do want you to grapple with this individually in your head. If this is our great mission, how's it going for you? Are you on mission? If this is the one big critical objective that our success as a church will be measured by, are you contributing to the objective? Honestly, I think a lot of us are not excited about the answer we just gave. So the next question then is, why? If you're not on mission, why not? What is the barrier that keeps us, you and I, from executing this mission? If our news about Jesus is so good, why are we not out in the streets right now shouting it to everybody who walks by? Why are each of us not baptizing 12 people every month? Well, I've talked to a lot of people about this, and I know a lot about it from my own personal struggles. I'm not saying I'm an expert or anything, but you can't spell evangelism without Evan. One of the big struggles of doing this, a struggle that I also feel, is a lack of confidence. It's what it almost always boils down to. It's not a lack of confidence in our message. It's not that we doubt Jesus' ability to heal, to change lives, to alter people's futures. It's not a lack of confidence in the good news. It's a lack of confidence in our own ability to deliver it. We're not afraid that our message is insufficient. We're afraid that our delivery of the message will be. We struggle to come up with the right words. We fear that they're going to ask us questions and we won't know the answers. We feel like our knowledge of the Bible is not comprehensive enough to be able to respond. We feel like when they ask us how to actually apply it, that we won't know, because half the time we don't know how to apply it to our own lives. We don't know what we're going to say. And I want you to know, if you feel those fears, you are in good company this morning. I believe that. You are not the only person in this room who feels that pressure. In fact, if you'll humor me, I'm gonna get a little vulnerable here with you and ask you to do the same. I would love it if you would respond out loud with a yes or no to this next question. Have you ever felt those fears? I knew you'd say that. I knew you would say that. Because I've been a Christian my entire life. I spent 36 years in and around ministry. I went to Bible college. I served as a minister here at this church. I did it for almost a decade, and I have those exact same fears. It's real. We aren't afraid that our message is insufficient. We're afraid that our delivery will be. We feel like Moses in Exodus chapter 4. God called out to Moses and he gave him an important mission, and here's how Moses responded. You might know his name even if you're not familiar with his story. Moses was a big deal. Here's how he responded. Pardon your servant, Lord. I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you've spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and of tongue. Dude, I feel that. I feel that too. So this fear, it drives us often to script, to rehearse, to try to think through the conversation in advance and predict what questions are they going to have, what objections could they have, how could I respond to this? And that is a good thing, I think, because this is important. But it can become a problem when our preparation causes us to stop listening. When we're so focused on remembering the script that we've written that we stop listening to the one that we're trying to reach. And it makes us sound like pushy salesmen rather than like caring friends and family who are trying to bring people we love into heaven with us. And we don't want to sound like pushy salesmen. At Victory, we have this saying. We say, I want something for you. But often people hear the message of Jesus as, I want something from you. And for you, that sounds like good news, because it is. But I want something from you? Nah, I'm good. It sounds like bad news every time. See, ultimately, it doesn't matter what your intentions are. It matters how they hear you. What you intend is far less important than what they hear you say. And I'm sure you've felt that before in every relationship. It doesn't matter what you meant to say to your spouse. It matters what they heard you say. It doesn't matter what you meant for your kid to hear. It matters what they want to believe. It doesn't matter what you meant to convey to your lost friend. It matters what words you chose to use and the way they interpreted your tone. And some of that is in your control, but some of it just isn't. The inescapable reality of being a human who lives in a world with other humans is that you can't control other people's perception. And that's why your best strategy, in spite of how strange this may sound, your best strategy for reaching the one is not to try to find the perfect words or to wait for the perfect opportunity, because that may never come up. See, biblical evangelism, it's very much like growing a plant. If I wanted to kill this plant, I could do it. I don't want to brag. There are a dozen ways I could do it with 100% success. In fact, I'm so good at it, I often do it without even trying. It just happens. But ask anybody who grows plants successfully, and they'll tell you the opposite is not true. You can't grow plants perfectly with 100% success rate. And yet people make their living growing plants. How do they do it? Well, they realize the fact that you can't control 100% of bugs. You can't control the weather. You can't control power outages. You can't control water pipes breaking. You can't control the neighborhood dog who likes to pee on your hostas. And most importantly, some plants just don't want to grow the way you want them to. So how do they succeed? How do people make living as a farmer? Well, ask one of them and they'll tell you, you can't force a plant to grow, but you can create the ideal environment for growth to happen. And you kind of got to trust God for the rest. Because you don't control every variable, but you can use every variable that you do control to craft intentionally the ideal environment for growth to happen. And your friends, they're a lot like this little guy. We can't force our friends to accept Jesus. We can't force our family to accept Jesus, but we can create the ideal environment for them to hear the good news and accept it. We can't make them accept Christ no matter how honed and rehearsed our message is, but we can intentionally create an environment where they might hear and accept the truth. And the ideal environment is trust-filled relationships. That's all it is. I've been a Christian for a very long time, and I've seen a lot of life change. I've been very blessed to see God move in big ways, and I've seen a lot of people make decisions for Jesus. Heck, if you've been at Victory for more than like 18 minutes, you've seen a lot of people make decisions for Jesus. God is doing some incredible things in our church and in our community right now. And do you know the most consistent factor in all of it? Earthly factor, I mean, obviously Jesus, but earth-wise, the most consistent factor in every single life change has been relationships. Why do you think the first thing the widow did or the woman did when she found her coin was call her friends and celebrate about it? She says, hey, I found my coin. And all of us are like, whoop-de-doo, you found your coin. But her friends knew and her friends cared. That relationship mattered because relationships are the most important factor in life change. When you ask people about their faith or their conversion, every time they're going to tell you stories of relationships. They'll tell you about the Sunday school teacher who first challenged them to actually study their Bible rather than just reading random verses. They'll tell you about the minister who came and visited them in the hospital when their kid was sick. They'll tell you about the church camp counselor who baptized them, the teacher who showed them love and kindness in spite of their behavior in the classroom. Do you guys know how many people I have met who got saved because of a roadside billboard? Exactly 0. Now, I fully expected, after first and second service, I fully expected somebody to come up to me and be like, actually, and if that's the case, I rejoice for you. That's amazing. God can work in crazy ways. But I will tell you, it almost never happens. Almost never. I can say with confidence after 36 years of life in and around ministry that life change happens almost exclusively in the context of trusting relationships. And the opposite is also true. We are naturally distrustful of people with whom we don't have relationships because relationships create trust. Strangers create skepticism. I remember back in college, I had an interaction with a stranger that I will never forget. Yet another intense, self-deprecating story, but bear with me. On this particular day, I was sitting at a red light in downtown Knoxville, Tennessee. And I will admit, I was people watching rather than street light watching. And so as the light turned green, I remember the white truck behind me laying on his horn to let me know it's time to go. Well, it startled me, so I cut the wheel just a little too hard, and I hit the gas just a little too hard, and I slammed into the curb as I rounded the corner. I was so embarrassed. And then I looked in my mirror, and the white truck was gone. And I thought, oh no, this guy's stuck sitting through an entire light cycle because I sat through the whole green. He's ticked. Bet I'll never see that guy again. Except, a few moments later, I heard a familiar truck horn out my passenger side, or my driver's side window rather. And I looked out the window, and there was the white truck. And I was horrified to see he was matching my speed. He had rolled down his window. He was red in the face, screaming at me. Now, despite my I believe the kids would call it swole appearance. Don't laugh at that. That was not the joke. I'm not afraid to admit I was terrified. Here's this guy, and I'm thinking, what am I gonna do? I look up ahead and I think, I'm just gonna hit the gas again. Let's go a little faster. But the light turned red, and I counted the cars. We were gonna be side by side at this light. And as the engine noise died down, I was absolutely spiraling. I'm thinking, what am I gonna do? Like, this guy's rolled down his window. What if he has a full-blown road rage meltdown? What if he gets out of the car? What do? I get out of the car? Like, what if this guy has a weapon? Like, what's gonna happen? I was sweating profusely. And I remember, as the car slowed down, the engine noise got quiet, and this time I could hear him. I couldn't ignore him. He was saying, hey, kid. I thought, do I pretend to be deaf? What do I do? But I couldn't, my conscience wouldn't let me. So I summoned all my courage and I turned and I looked out the window, and I will never forget, as I made eye contact with this guy, I will never forget what happened. He said, hey, this is for you. He reached down into his passenger floorboards, picked something up and held it out the window at me. It was my hubcap. He didn't miss the light. He was a good Samaritan, and he stopped and picked up the hubcap that I had ejected from my car when I made contact with that curb. But I had spiraled so thoroughly that I couldn't hear what he was saying. I didn't even register what he had in his hand until I was, many days later. All I could do was say, it's okay, you can keep it, and hit the gas. See, God designed us to live in community. He designed us to be with other people, but he also gave us a healthy skepticism for people that we don't know. We have natural distrust for strangers, and we don't like to talk about personal, vulnerable things with strangers. It can't get much more personal and vulnerable than spiritual matters. So if you ever want to breach that barrier, you have to begin by starting a relationship. I think that's actually why Jesus had disciples. One of the most common questions that people struggle with when they first become a Christian and learn about how Jesus did ministry is they say, if Jesus is God, why did he need 12 guys to follow him around? Like, teacher Jesus had 12 TAs? What's the deal with that? But I don't think it was about the help. Jesus knew he was going to be crucified. I think Jesus knew that the church would be built on him, but it wouldn't be built by him. And he didn't want to leave behind a memoir. He wanted to form deep relationships with people who could leave eyewitness accounts of all the things that they'd seen, because he knew that that could build a church that would endure for centuries. And this isn't just speculation on my part. In Mark 3, it tells us Jesus appointed 12 that they might be with him and he might send them out to preach. Jesus wanted people to be with him, to do life with him. That's why later in this same passage in Mark, it tells us a story about a crowd. A crowd was sitting around Jesus and they told him, hey, your mother and brothers are outside. They're looking for you. And Jesus says, who are my mother and brothers? Then he looked at the crowd sitting around him and he said, here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother. Jesus was all about building good relationships everywhere he went because he knew the transformative power that relationships hold. That age-old adjective, goodness gracious, I did the same thing in first hour. Age-old adage. Next time, don't pick things that have alliteration if you write a sermon. Age-old adage is true. People just don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. They don't. They don't want to hear it. And I'm excited to tell you that the effort of sharing the good news and building that ideal environment, the question of how do we intentionally build relationships of trust, that answer is pretty easy. And I'll give it to you right now. It's something we can all do with almost no practice, with only a tiny bit of intentionality. In fact, I can sum it up in just one word. Listen. That's the word. Listen. That's the word. When people are resistant to the gospel, they usually are resistant because people in their experience are trying to talk them into Jesus. So that's what we do. We talk about him and we talk about us and we talk and then we talk and we try to talk them into Jesus. But people don't really want to hear that. That's not what they want. The ideal environment for life change is relationships, and relationships are not built on talking. They're built on listening. People, they will listen to you, but the majority of people want to be heard before they listen. They will listen, but they want to know that you're going to listen and that Jesus is going to hear. So listen. The good news is, this is like the easiest way to not sound like a pushy salesman, because they typically don't listen. Start by asking them some good questions. In fact, you can begin here. This is pretty easy. Begin by asking, how can I pray for you? This is such a beautiful question because it's disarming, but it's also non-threatening. Worst case scenario, they're going to say, I don't really believe in that, thanks. I've had that happen to me on multiple occasions. But more often than not, do you know what happens? When I ask, can I pray for you? They start to talk, and I listen. And I learn more about that person in about 3 minutes than I would learn in 3 trips to a coffee shop together or 3 months in small group together. It takes people a while to open up unless you ask good questions. So try asking them, how can I pray for you? And then listen to what they say. And then keep asking good questions. Not like, did you see the game on Sunday? Or, what do you do for work? Like, those are fine questions, but they're superficial. And if all we do is ask superficial questions, all we will ever accomplish is adding people to our friends list, not adding relationships. And those are very different things. So ask some good questions. Move beyond the time fillers and the breeze shooters. Remember, we're not trying to close a sale, we're trying to open a relationship. So ask questions like, what's your story? How did you end up here? And then as you begin to build trust and grow a relationship, ask a little bit deeper questions. Ask, what's been hard for you lately? What do you think about faith? You might try inviting them to a meal. That's great. You're both gonna eat anyway, right? Might as well do it together. If you're anything like me, if you enjoy eating as much as I do, it makes it so easy to listen because your mouth is always full. It's great. Find out their favorite team and then invite them over to watch a game with you. Learn their kids' names. Not in a creepy way, you don't want to end up on a list, but learn about their family. Engage them. Listen. And here's the incredible part. When you begin with listening, the talking figures itself out. That big barrier that's always been between the Great Commission and you kind of stops being a problem when you begin with listening. Here's what I mean. Salvation is one size fits all. There's one Jesus. He's the only path to heaven. He died once, and he offers salvation to anybody who wants it. So salvation is one size fits all. But salvation is about more than just forgiveness. It's about a relationship with Jesus. And no two relationships look the same. Few people come to Jesus and make that decision to follow him for the exact same reasons. If you're in a relationship with him, you know why. You know why you finally made your choice. But your choice isn't mine. My choice probably isn't your one's. And you'll never know what reason it is unless you listen. And it tends to figure itself out. You know, salvation, like I said, salvation is about more than just forgiveness. It's about a relationship. And that relationship is good news. For some people, the good news of Jesus is that in addition to forgiveness, they receive freedom from addiction. For some people, the good news is reconciliation with estranged family. Because as they start behaving more like Jesus and putting their pride aside, they're brought back together again. For others, the good news of salvation is about hope and healing after they've gone through an abortion. For some, it's about the knowledge that their value is not measured by their performance at work or the number on their paycheck. For others, it's about a community who supports them when they receive a cancer diagnosis. I don't know what your reason is, but you know it. And unless you listen, you're never going to know what your one's reason is. So listen, and the talking will figure itself out. Don't let this week pass you by without taking one more intentional step towards a trusting relationship. Because the fastest path to heaven is a relationship here on this earth. Whatever that next step looks like, take it. Reaching the lost, I know it sounds like a daunting process, but it's all about taking one more good step. One more conversation. Pray for them one more time. Give them one more invitation. Share one more meal. And you know what might happen? That might lead to one more prodigal right here where God can save one more lost sheep. Christianity is not about self-help. It's about divine rescue. So don't let the lost stay lost. Don't quit searching. Don't quit praying. Don't quit listening. Don't quit feeling the agony of another lost sheep. And don't quit seeking one more. Let's pray together. God, sometimes that mission that you gave me that's so simple, it feels so hard. I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how to present it. I don't know that my life is the best example for how you can change things. I feel inadequate. But God, the beauty of salvation is that I don't do it, you do. So God, please fill me with the confidence and fill every person listening with the confidence to just take that next step. Not to try to be salvation, but to try to point their one toward the person who can give that salvation. Help us grow those relationships. Help us show the love and compassion that you showed when you sent your son to die for us. We pray today in Jesus' name, amen.